Welcome to the Daily Bite. I'm your host, Reverend Steve Andrews. Today's chapter is Revelation 17. Then one of the seven angels who had the seven bowls came and said to me, "Come, I will show you the judgment of the great prostitute who is seated on many waters, with whom the kings of the earth have committed sexual immorality, and with the wine of whose sexual immorality the dwellers on earth have become drunk." And he carried me away in the spirit into a wilderness. And I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast that was full of blasphemous names, and it had 7 heads and 10 horns. The woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet, and adorned with gold and jewels and pearls, holding in her hand a golden cup full of abominations and the impurities of her sexual immorality. And on her forehead was written a name of mystery, Babylon the Great, mother of prostitutes and of earth's abominations. And I saw the woman drunk with the blood of the saints, the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. When I saw her, I marveled greatly. But the angel said to me, "Why do you marvel? I will tell you the mystery of the woman, and of the beast with 7 heads and 10 horns that carries her. The beast that you saw was, and is not, and is about to rise from the bottomless pit and go to destruction. And the dwellers on earth whose names have not been written in the book of life from the foundation of the world will marvel to see the beast, because it was, and is not, and is to come. This calls for a mind with wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman is seated. They are also 7 kings, 5 of whom have fallen, one is, and the other has not yet come. And when he does come, he must remain only a little while. As for the beast that was and is not, it is an eighth, but it belongs to the 7, and it goes to destruction. And the 10 horns that you saw are 10 kings who have not yet received royal power, but they are to receive authority as kings for 1 hour, together with the beast. These are of one mind, and they hand over their power and authority to the beast. They will make war on the Lamb, and the Lamb will conquer them, for he is Lord of lords and King of kings, and those with him are called and chosen and faithful. And the angel said to me, "The waters that you saw, where the prostitute is seated, are peoples and multitudes and nations and languages. And the 10 horns that you saw, they and the beast will hate the prostitute. They will make her desolate and naked and devour her flesh and burn her up with fire, for God has put it into their hearts to carry out his purpose by being of one mind and handing over their royal power to the beast until the words of God are fulfilled. And the woman that you saw is the great city that has dominion over the kings of the earth." This is the word of the Lord. The theme that you want to focus on in today's chapter, as we see so much evil here, verse 14. Jump right to verse 14 with your children and focus on that as we think of all the evil that is going on in the world around us, all that has happened and all that may yet still happen. What's the point? What is the key? They will make war on the Lamb, and by extension of Jesus, also his church, and the Lamb will conquer them. For he is the Lord of lords and King of kings, and those with him are called and chosen and faithful. So, as we've seen in previous chapters and discussed in this book, one of the main points of the book of Revelation, the main point really of the book, is that Christ is victorious. And we've been talking about and seeing how he will defend his church, he will defend his people, both for the sake of his people, but also so that they can do the mission that he has given them to do. They can share that gospel with others. So that's here in this chapter as well, that the Lamb fights for us, protects us, keeps us as his own. Now, for the rest of the text, there's quite a bit here. Really, what you're seeing as the overview of the chapter is the work of the first and the second beast. Sometimes they work together, sometimes they don't. We see both in this very same chapter. So we start the text, and you have the great prostitute. That's the second beast. It is the religious beast. We're introduced to the two beasts back in chapter 13. There's the political beast, which represents all governing authority in creation, and there's the religious beast. And in both of these things, the devil works through these two beasts to manipulate the world. He tempts them, he misleads them so that he can harm the church. And so the political beast he uses to harm the church, and then the religious beast, which isn't the true church, but is a false church, he uses as well. Typically, the first beast is simply called a beast, or the beast, or the first beast even. But for some reason, and maybe we can ascribe something to it, the second beast gets different names through the book of Revelation. So, chapter 13, she's the second beast. We had her recently as the false prophet. Was that just chapter 16, I think? Um, it was recent, the last couple of days. Now in this chapter, she's the great prostitute, and we're gonna see this kind of thing with this. And what's going on here? Well, this is the idea, perhaps, of her deceptiveness. We learned in chapter 13 when the second beast first appeared that it had a voice like a dragon, and the dragon in Revelation is the devil. So the devil speaks words that lead astray, that are deceptive, that are crafty. And so it appears that this second beast, the religious beast, is doing the same thing. It's operating as the devil operates in this world, which makes sense, right? The devil trying to undermine the church, trying to tear down the church, that he would work in many and various ways. And so that's what we're seeing here in part. So she has led this second beast, prostitute, has led many kings of the earth astray. You could look at those as being the first beast as well. Uh, and this is that idea of emperor worship that we've talked about. So, every Caesar in Roman history just about wanted the people to worship him as a god. Nebuchadnezzar did that in the Old Testament. And there have been other examples throughout history as well. That's not uncommon. That's one way that the beasts work together. Sometimes they work together, um, almost like we see in the Middle Ages at the time before and after the Reformation. The political leaders and the religious leaders end up siding with each other to fight against others in the world, or even against the true church. And it comes and goes, because we see that in this chapter as well later on in the chapter. So here she's sitting on the beast, uh, but later in the chapter, the beast has turned on her and is attacking her. So sometimes God will even work through the first beast to fight back. So the God will work through government to fight against false prophets, false churches that arise. So we see both. But they are, in the beginning of this chapter, working together to fight against the church. The woman in verse 4 is being described as a very wealthy appearance. The purple and scarlet are rich garments that often were reserved for nobility, and the costly jewelry that she wears. So a wealthy appearance, likely to seduce, as she has seduced the kings of the earth already. This almost gets it, as she's a false prophet as well. The idea that we hear from Paul writing to Timothy, warning Timothy about those who will want nothing but people who will tickle their itching ears. So false prophets within the church who lead people astray because we're willing to let them. Verse 5, on her forehead. So we read about back in chapter 13, the mark of the beast, as these things were introduced to us. And here we have that mark already. So the second beast has the first beast mark on her forehead. And it is Babylon the Great. So the enemy of God's people is upon her. And then verse 6, she is described as being drunk with the blood of the saints. So the false church has, in many times, many places, martyred the true church, has attacked and killed individual Christians. We can go back to the Old Testament, to Queen Jezebel for an example of that. We can go to the time of Jesus in the New Testament and look at the work of the chief priests. We can go today, we can talk about Islam and how they are constantly attacking the Christians in the Middle East part of the world. Many martyrs in the recent years. So this is certainly true, has continued to be true throughout the ages. Now, before we look at the next paragraph there, one of the questions we could ask our children is, how does this woman, the second beast, compare to the other woman from chapter 12? See if they remember. This is a chance to do some reflection on the book as a whole and what you've studied. So that first woman in chapter 12, who is Mary, who is also the image of the church. So we have really the church against the false church that are being opposed to one another in these texts. So you've got these two prominent women in the book of Revelation that are being mentioned. One is the people of God, the children of God, the faithful, as we read about in verse 14, and the other is this image of a seductress, a prostitute who seeks to lead the church away from Christ instead of to Christ. Now, as you look at the next paragraph, so much of this is about the relationship of the beast to the beast. I mean, you get this idea of all these different kings, and one of the main takeaways for the paragraph is to know that these the political beasts, these different kings of these different governments of all the world over all time, they come and go, right? Kings die and new kings take their place. New forms of government arise, but they all end up being the same. They're all part of this beast that fights against the church, that seeks to harm the church. And it's simply been that way ever since 1 Samuel chapter 8, where God warned his people, you don't actually want a king. The king will do terrible things to you. And here we continue to rebel against God. We continue to put our trust in our government instead of in the Lord's care and provision for us. But this beast, even though he comes and goes throughout all this time, lots of different kings, lots of different rulers. The seven kings, for example, is symbolic of the whole period of that number seven between Christ's ascension and his second coming. But nonetheless, this beast is not timeless. Jesus is the one who is, who was, who is, and is to come. This beast is the one who was, is not, and is about to. So there in verse 8, or in still verse 8, was and is not and is to come. And then down in verse 11, was and is not. So all three of those descriptions of the beast fall short of the timelessness of Christ. Yes, the beast is powerful. Yes, the beast causes destruction. Yes, the beast, even together, both are harming the church and killing the saints, but they are not God. They are not all powerful. They are not eternal. And Christ is, at the end of this chapter, Christ is victorious over them. So you can ask your children in this section, where are we? Where are we as the church in all of this time? Again, this covers the whole of the time from the ascension of Jesus until his second coming. Where are we? We are the verse 6 people who are being martyred. We are the ones who are being killed for our faith, and we're suffering. But again, verse 14 is our focus, all this chapter. They will make war on the Lamb, and the Lamb will conquer them. For he is Lord of lords and King of kings, and those who are with him are called and chosen and faithful. That's your focus point. Verse 16, as I mentioned before, we see the beasts turn on each other, and God makes use of the government to judge, as he so often does. God will use one sinful government to judge another sinful government. We see that multiple times in the Bible, and we see it throughout history, really. Governing authority, they have the power of the sword that comes from God himself. And so here, God giving them the power of the sword, and they wield it against the other beast. Beast turns on beast. The government turns on the church, the false church again. They've already been against the true church all this time. They turn on the false church and attack her too. And that's, I don't know that I want to say cyclical, but it comes and goes as well. So sometimes the two beasts work together. Sometimes they fight against each other and they're at odds. And we've seen all of that. We've seen both of those positions numerous times. If you study history, you can pick up on these things pretty quickly as you see these interactions unfolding. And really, if I had a better grasp on all the different situations in the world at the moment, I think it's probably fair to say that both of those situations are happening even in the present. You can find places where the governments and the false church are working together against Christians, and you can find spots where the government and the false churches are at war amongst themselves. It's just common throughout history. So that's our text for today. Christ has conquered, and we focus on that. That's where we live as the Christian. That's our hope.